We already know from research that money doesn't buy happiness. But why is that? And if money cannot make us happy, what can? Well, today I will discuss these with my guest, Dr. Daniel Sachau, who is a professor in the Department of Psychology at Minnesota State University-Mankato. He has been studying the link between life satisfaction and income for many years. Dr. Daniel, I welcome you to the program and thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yep. So first, I want to start with your background. What made you interested in doing this research between life satisfaction and income? Was there any personal reason or it just happened?
Well, I think generally my happiness thermostat is set a little high. So I'm a fairly happy guy to begin with. But I was a graduate student and I worked with a guy named Frederick Herzberg out at the University of Utah. And he had spent his whole career studying employee job satisfaction. And it turned out a lot of the work that he did related to life satisfaction, not just satisfaction with one's job, but satisfaction with life in general. He was interested in, and I became very interested in, how you make jobs more interesting so that people, you spend 8 hours a day or more lately on the job. You really should have that part of your life be fulfilling. So I was interested in job enrichment, and it turns out many of the things that make a job satisfying are the things that make life satisfying. And of course, one of the big issues is when people think about jobs, they think about money right away. And the question had always been, if you pay employees more, will they be happier? And it turns out they're happy for a little bit, and then they become accustomed to that new salary, and pretty soon they start looking around the organization and they find people who make more, and then they become unhappy. So I've been kind of trying to sell this idea to students for years and years that what they should be focusing on is finding the kind of work that makes them excited, that leads to a sense of fascination. And that's really what they should focus on instead of money, because there'll never be enough. There's just never enough money. But
how much do we know so far about the link between happiness and money from research? It's very counterintuitive that more money doesn't necessarily make us happy, isn't it?
Yeah, let me be clear. It's the absence of money can make people miserable. There's no doubt about that. Poverty is painful, right? If you're worried about the health of your children because you don't have enough money to pay for a physician, if you're worried about getting clean water or electricity, the absence of money can put you in a situation where you're pretty miserable. But the point Herzberg made, and I've studied over the years, is the idea that the absence of misery is not the same thing as happiness. The absence of misery is a kind of a neutral state that you become accustomed to very, very quickly. But happiness tends to come from other things. So it's easy to imagine what money will buy you. We can picture ourselves with nicer cars and fancier homes and better clothes and all that sort of stuff. But what it turns out is mostly money does is it alleviates misery, it alleviates dissatisfaction rather than leading to long-term life satisfaction.
Yeah, okay. So when we are earning a lot of money, if we are poor, so we need money, that will take us out of misery. But that doesn't mean it will necessarily make us happy because the link is very loose, the connection is very loose. Is that right? Something like that?
And there is actually good research. For instance, researchers have studied real earnings and life satisfaction. So real earnings means adjusted for inflation. So if you look in the United States, for instance, real earnings have increased steadily since the 1800s. But life satisfaction hasn't changed very much. If you look within organizations and you look at the compensation employees get and their job satisfaction, you find that there's not a very clear relationship at all. the people at the lowest end of the organization aren't necessarily less happy than the people at the top of the organization. Even studies of, I think I mentioned this in a talk, even studies of lottery winners, is you find that people who won the lottery and they got a huge amount of money in a very short amount of time immediately after they win the lottery are pretty happy, are pretty excited because they're buying new things, but it wears off pretty quickly. And about a year later, they're not much happier than the average person. So there's internationally, there are studies too, when you look at real income of countries where you can compare marks to, or I should say pounds or euros to dollars or rupees or whatever. If you can compare across countries, you don't really find that the richest countries are the happiest. Now, what's interesting and consistent with this idea that money can reduce suffering is there is a bit of a direct line for the lowest income countries. Among the poorest countries in the world, when you start moving up in average income, measures of life satisfaction go up, but only to a certain point. And then once you get past that point, it doesn't really matter how wealthy the country is, their happiness isn't that much greater. So I think what's happening there is, for the very poorest parts of the world, additional income is reducing suffering. And the way researchers measure it, we don't make a fine distinction between eliminating suffering and being happy. So it looks like for the poorest the poorest people in the world, increased income means greater satisfaction. But I think what we're really seeing is just less suffering.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And I think you already know this. There is a famous study done, I think, by an American economist, Richard Easterling. It's called Easterling Paradox. I think you already know about this. After a certain threshold, even if income rises, satisfaction doesn't rise accordingly. So it's a very famous study, and it has been reference to people who are writers or bloggers. They continuously refer to this study that even if you're earning a lot of money, it doesn't mean you will be happier. So in your TED talk, I think you gave the best explanation. It's about the expectation gap. If our expectations are high and our income is low, we can never be happy. So there is always a mismatch between expectation and income. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why our expectations rise and why it doesn't de-escalate, as you said it in your TED talk?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I don't know whether it's just general human nature to kind of look up, to say, look at that fancy home or that bigger boat or that, that person is more beautiful. Imagine if I could be like that. We tend to kind of look towards having nicer stuff. I don't know why. There's some evolutionary advantage in that and long-term survival. I don't know. However, we're also bombarded with companies who are trying to convince us that if we just buy this next new thing, then we'll be happier. Think about the number of ads you see in a typical day. I mean, from the morning when you get up, the radio might be on and somebody on that radio is trying to sell you something and convince you that you'll be happier. And then, you get in the car and there's billboards and they're trying to tell you, hey, if you had this, you'd be happier. And then we watch television and now our internet, which we all work on all day long. And now we're getting little pings all day long with advertising. There's plenty of people who have something to gain by convincing us that we will be happier if we just purchase the newer, shinier car, the better, bigger home, the fancier watch, what have you. So I think there's a lot of pressure we feel. There's not a lot of pressure from people who say, hey, don't you dial it down a little bit? There's not money to be made. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't people who don't do that. There are, there's any number of religious traditions. In fact, good luck finding the religious tradition that says, you know how you can be happy? Money. You're not going to find that. But you will find lots of references across worldwide religions that say, you know what? Don't spend your life effort chasing money, because, and they don't spell it out in most, religious traditions about rising expectations, but it's built into the idea that if you try to find your contentment in life, your real life satisfaction, you'll just never get there. So I don't know. Again, I'm going to follow the money. There's plenty of people who have money to gain by convincing us or trying to convince us that money will make us happy, or newer, shinier things will make us happy. And there's not so much to gain from people saying, hey, let's dial it down. Focus your attention on activities in life that really can produce long-term happiness.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember you gave one example also in your TED Talk. So you said, let's say you have a Rolls Royce, which is, of course, a very expensive car, but you will find an advertiser who will tell you the Rolls Royce you have is not the best. So you need even a better Rolls Royce, and that might make you happier. So this is kind of the funny thing. Even though you have the best in class when it comes to a certain product or something or a service, and still there will be something who will try to sell you something, a better version of the product or service. So I think
you shouldn't be happy with that one. You should buy the new one. Absolutely.
And I think human mind gets trapped in that message that he or she will think, because you also talked about your Volkswagen. I remember, if I remember correctly, 1962 Volkswagen. That's what his first car. But your friend had a better car. I think it was 1968 Volkswagen. And when you were writing that, you thought, oh my God, maybe my car is not better. So I think better version of my car. So anyway, it seems that we are in a rat race, whether we are chasing money, we are chasing fame, we are chasing status. And it's a big problem. So what do you think? How can we prevent ourselves from participating in this rat race, this chasing game?
It's effortful. You have to kind of remind yourself. And, I've been lecturing on this topic for, 30 plus years now. And I'm guilty, just as guilty as anybody else. Take the process of just shopping for something. And of course, now with the internet, every store everywhere is open to us. So you can go look for one product, and boy, I can get started down this path of, okay, I'm going to buy a cordless drill, right? I'm going to go buy one of those. And then now there's 1,000 different stores that'll sell me one of 10 different or 20 different brands of cordless drills. And I start looking at the cheap one, and I go, oh, look, here's the features this has got. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, I could get a little bigger battery on this one, or a little more power on the next one, or this comes with more. And then pretty soon I've spent hours, and I started out the day thinking, what I really need is a drill so I could drill a couple holes in some wood. $50 would probably get it done. But by the end of the day, I'm shopping for $300 or $500 drills. And I have to make a moment and go, wait, something's gone wrong here. I need to stop doing this. I think every car shopper can tell you how you might start out at the beginning of the day going, this is my budget, this is what I'm spending. Then by the end of the day, you're up on a car lot you can have no business being in. So I don't know. There is a number of folks who are talking about voluntary simplicity, which is a way of saying, hey, let's just slow it down. We don't need all this stuff. In fact, we've become kind of tethered to it. It's holding us down. We own so much stuff. I was reading an interesting story the other day about just the growth of the storage unit business in the United States. It's exploding because people have so much stuff in their homes, they're now renting, or in some cases buying, storage units so they can store more stuff there. And every time you buy something, I think I mentioned in the talk that there are a variety of reasons. It's not just this ratcheting expectations that causes or prevents people from finding satisfaction with money. One of the other reasons that money fails to buy satisfaction is that when we purchase things, we have to take care of them, right? If you buy a big fancy boat, let's just say, it all seems great, when you're in the showroom and you think, I'm going to buy this boat and I'll be able to go out in the lake, and we picture what it's going to be like. But we forget, oh, yeah, well, you got to have a trailer for a little boat, and for a big boat, a crane, I guess, to get it. You got to have a place to store it. You got to have insurance for it. You got to have a car big enough to pull it. You got to have countless life jackets, stuff that goes with it. So a lot of these purchases come with hidden costs in terms of taking up your time. Doing maintenance on new things isn't always that interesting. And so I think one of the things that's important is people realize, well, if you stop and think before you make a big purchase, and you ask yourself, okay, how much of my lifetime will I have to dedicate to this thing? How much am I going to have to insure this for? How much will it depreciate? You might stop. If you just stop and take a beat, you might dial it down and go, you know what? Maybe I don't really need that extra thing. While it will be fun for a small amount of time, it also means it's going to break and you got to worry about it. And then I think around up here in the Arctic, I look outside, it's completely snow covered. A lot of my neighbors have snowmobiles, and they have these big four-wheeler side-by-side things. And while they're all great fun when you get them, but every one of them seems to use a different kind of gasoline. And they all need to be stored, and they all need winterizing or summerizing, depending on which you're using. So all of that stuff that people buy thinking it's going to lead to long-term happiness has some hidden costs with it. And I think it's just try to keep that in mind. Try to keep in mind the idea that eliminating hassle isn't the same as being happy, So I don't know. It's a battle every day. I have to. My wife's very good about this. She's not materialistic at all, and here I am, the guy lecturing on it. I'm terrible, I can easily get caught up in that. I sort of enjoy that shopping for stuff. So I wish I had a better answer, but I think it's just being mindful of it, just being aware. And again, there aren't that many sources in our life that are telling us, dial it down, slow down. Spend your time doing the kind of things that really will produce long-term happiness. Be with family, do something you feel really competent in, find autonomy where you can control your time and what you're doing and how you're doing it. So I guess that would be part of my message is just take a beat, take a moment and think, all right, what's this gonna do for me? What are the extra costs,